Welcome to day 45 of the Seeker's Guide to Soul Contact. 365 lessons to bring you closer to soul and spirit. Today's theme is I will forgive 70 times 7. The Apostle Peter was curious about how far one should go with forgiveness. Here's a quote from the book of Matthew. Then came Peter to him and said, Lord, how often should my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Shall it be like 7 times? Jesus said unto him, I say not unto thee until 7 times, but until 70 times 7. 70 times 7 equals 490 times. More offenses than any one person will ever rack up. This is merely a way for Jesus to tell the disciples to forgive without limits. A Course in Miracles puts an interesting twist on forgiveness. It says this: God does not forgive because he never condemned. The blameless cannot blame, and those who have accepted their innocence see nothing to forgive. Yet forgiveness is a means by which I will recognize my innocence. It is the reflection of God's love on earth. It will bring me near enough to heaven that the love of God can reach down to me and raise me up to him. He will teach you to remember that forgiveness is not loss, but it's your salvation. And that is complete forgiveness in which you recognize that there is nothing to forgive. You are absolved completely. The Course puts an interesting twist on forgiveness by telling us that the way to forgive without measure is to realize there's nothing to forgive. This applies to ourselves as well as to others. A lack of forgiveness is strongly associated with grievances, where when an offense is registered and forgiveness does not take place, the person will hold within himself negative feelings toward his brother. And as we said, this creates a barrier to soul contact. Students who study A Course in Miracles will often agree with the words in theory, but find them difficult in practice. After all, how can one buy into the idea that there's nothing to forgive when people do so many harmful things? On the other hand, if the seeker can reach that state of mind where he sees nothing to forgive, then forgiving 70 times 7 or infinite forgiveness becomes a reality. Let us look at an example to see how the ideal should play out. Your friend Alex stole $100 from you. Not only did you need that $100, but it hurt your feelings that a friend will do such a thing to you. You were very disappointed in him. If someone were to tell you at this point there's nothing to forgive, you may have a hard time believing it, as the $100 was real, as well as the hurt you felt by the betrayal of your friend. To rise to the nothing to forgive consciousness, the seeker must elevate his thought beyond that which is suffering the hurt, which is the emotional self. The feeling nature feels hurt over this and many other offenses, but the feeling nature is a temporary part of yourself. Our true self, which is one with the inner God, is engulfed in the higher feelings motivated by love. When the seeker focuses on the better angels of his nature, he will look beyond the vulnerable emotional self and dwell on the consciousness of the higher invulnerable self that cannot suffer offense. Because the seeker in this consciousness cannot be offended or hurt, there will never be anything to forgive. Now, switching consciousness from the lower, vulnerable emotional self to the invulnerable, higher, loving self is easier said than done, but it can be accomplished. Like any good endeavor, it takes a lot of practice. And practice we must, for solid soul contact is impossible to one who is not forgiven in his heart and holds a grievance. And remember, forgiveness applies to yourself as well as to others. The assignment today is to first review your life and list 3 offenses that have happened that were difficult to forgive. Do they still hold a residual effect? Have you let them go as if there was nothing to forgive in the first place? So next examine your present circumstance. Is there anyone who offends you or that you find aggravating or is really messing things up? Are you able to place yourself in a state of mind that sees the offense as illusion with no power? Yes, that may be difficult to do, but it can be done. During the next few days, pay attention to all your interactions in person and on the internet and observe how they affect your emotional self. End with this affirmation. Contemplate any negative feelings that affect your emotional self and say this: these feelings represent my temporary self. My true and vulnerable self sees nothing to forgive. This is a lesson of great importance, and it's difficult to absorb, but it can be done. And when it is done, the seeker will be greatly rewarded. See you tomorrow.